Hello and welcome to another legendary episode of the Stripping the Dipping podcast. You're joined by a usual dynamic duo of the formidable F1 Blag, and of course, your boy, A to the AMGs, AMG Denzel Clarkson, for another really insightful and amazing episode here on the podcast. So, it's been a really enthralling week of motorsport, to be fair. It's just Formula One. We've got lots to uncover in terms of a breaking news of a honey badger breaking into AlphaTauri seat, a British Grand Prix to review, and a very special guest that has many experiences in the motorsport industry as an engineer as well, and going to give us some really awesome insights as well. So I'm very privileged and very happy to introduce Katie to the show. Katie Lawrence. Katie, how are you doing today? And, just generally, what have you been up to at the weekend?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Feel a little right, I've got big shoes to fill after that intro. But yeah, no good. Just saying I've been recovering and catching up on sleep after the Spa 24 hours. So actually awake for 44 hours straight that weekend. So it's taken me quite a while to get back to a normal sleep pattern and energy level.
Absolutely. Well, we know as esteemed endurance fans ourselves that just like endurance racing and GT3 racing on a whole is very, very tiresome, very, very competitive, and also it does take a lot of resource out of the engineers like yourself, the drivers, the mechanics, and even the fans as well. So it's really awesome to have you on today and to go through some of the experiences. Like we said as well, there's also some breaking news to discuss, so we'll definitely get into that as well. But Katie, what we like to do with all of our guests, coming into the family, coming into the show, and to kind of build a profile about you, where did your motorsport engineering journey begin? And also, we've kind of learned from our due diligence that almost at one stage wanted to go in a different direction of studying law. I'm just going to tell you off the bat, you haven't missed anything by not pursuing that. How did you end up, going from one extreme to the other and studying maths and would you see that as a blessing in disguise in relation to your journey from the beginning?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, it was, I don't know how to describe it, from a very early age, I've been a competitive horse rider. It's going to go on a completely different tangent. And I was reasonably good, but we just didn't have the money behind us for me to be really good. My mum was barmaid, my dad sort of farmer, carpenter. We didn't have loads of money behind us, and obviously I didn't really know much about what careers are out there. So literally I was at school and was just like, oh, what earns lots of money? Lawyer sounds like it probably does. So applied to do that at university with absolutely zero thought process or research other than that sounds like it'll earn me good money so I can afford my own horse, like more horses in the future. Sound careers advice, obviously at a young age. But my A-levels, I did biology, chemistry and maths. I just picked those purely because I liked them, which didn't really set me up for law. So I actually didn't get the grades I wanted, and the only places I got offered were at universities that I didn't really want to go to. Again, coming from a background of farmers and non-academics, really didn't have any clue about what universities were good. I mean, at the age of 4, I was like, I want to go to Cambridge. I don't know why. I don't know where that came from at the age of 4. And obviously I didn't get in there. So basically I was at a horse show and I got my results. And had actually become quite close to my maths teacher at the time, and she just, what's happened to my computer? She literally just said, you like maths, why don't you see if you can get a place in clearing? And I think the sound advice she gave me is if you build a career and foundation based upon what you really like doing and really enjoy, you can't go wrong. I had no idea where that was going to lead me, but I knew I'd enjoy studying it at university. And I think, if you're going to make the most of your time at university, you might as well do it doing something you love.
Absolutely, and I think that is a lot of there's interesting nuggets of advice and also just kind of lessons to learn from that too, Katie, in terms of, following kind of your heart. And, whilst everybody has to make a living, and in this day and age, just some people are working 2-3 jobs just to kind of pursue their goals or dreams or ambitions. if you always go for something which you really enjoy and something that, you know, you can see yourself doing in the future, you always gonna have that motivation to push yourself to do better and to, you know, be resilient even when times are not easy or when things don't go to plan and so forth as well. So, you know, it's really interesting to hear about that. But then also, like, you know, in terms of the motorsport aspect of it as well, growing up, who were the idols that you looked up to, you know, in terms of racing drivers, teams, you know, which drivers didn't you like at the time when you first got into F1 and motorsports?
I was quite late into it all. I actually grew up with a cricket dad, so that was the only thing we were ever allowed on TV was the Ashes. But motorsport, I was in my third year of university, and my boyfriend at the time was a big fan and was sat watching it most Sundays as you do. And I was kind of like, oh, that looks cool. Like, that's got aerodynamics in, and I study aerodynamics, so there must be something here that I could do to get into that. And for me, actually, what really pressed me into that career was the opportunity to win a world championship as my job. I was like, how many jobs do you get to do where you can win a world championship? And that actually was the biggest driver for me to getting into this industry. But certainly in terms of drivers, I mean, I was a big Jenson Button fan, really. He was one of the ones I watched. I really enjoyed watching like Brawn come through, you know, as a massive underdogs and win the championship. So, yeah, I guess they were kind of my early days, even though it's not actually that early. Sort of memories of Formula One.
Well, you know, they say the saying, Katie, like better late than never. And to be fair, you picked a really good time because, you know, back in 2009 when we had like the new cars, Braun as a team had found that kind of loophole in the regulations with the double-decker diffuser as such. And basically, you know, Jensen, which at one stage looked like he wouldn't have a job with Honda, basically pulling out the sport, to then taking the fight, you know, to Seb and to Lewis and to the Ferraris. It's really a great sporting, like, you know, thing to follow. And we even see today that, you know, we still look for kind of breakthroughs in terms of, you know, aerodynamic, you know, wizardry or kind of like, you know, breakthroughs in certain innovative like modes or stuff like that as well. So I could definitely see, you know, the kind of transparency and the thing between the two. And for sure, I mean, you know, on the topic of F1, I think we'd be remiss about not talking about a certain honey badger that's managed to get a seat back on the grid. I'm going to alley this to Blag. Blag, take it away.
Yeah, it's a good question. Hello. Good to be on the airwaves again. So you'll be listening to this on a Saturday, but today, date of recording, the Tuesday, we've been surprised, I guess, by the news that Nyck De Vries, the first ever true world champion, FIA world champion, has lost his seat and has been replaced by Australian Daniel Ricciardo. I think the writing was on the wall when Helmut Marko was joking about how long he'd stay around and asking when the Dutch Grand Prix is last weekend. So I suppose it was putting him out of his misery, but still somewhat of a surprise to get less than half a season in what is, to be honest, not a great car. Katie, are you sort of following closely sort of F1 this season? Have you been seeing Nyck De Vries' performances? Any sort of comments on that at all?
I mean, I'd be lying if I said I was following it incredibly closely. A lot of the races I've been working in clash, so I just sort of see a lot of the behind the scenes and catch up with the news these days rather than actually seeing it all fresh. But yeah, I know Nick, and I'm actually quite surprised really to see what's happened. I haven't seen his results in detail, but he was always a very, very talented driver. But like I say, seeing the honey badger back on the grid's never a bad thing. So yeah, it's pretty tough losing a seat halfway through a season. And I think how he comes back from this will be a true reflection probably of what sort of athlete he is.
It's a huge shout, and in a way, you know, you've got Daniel Ricciardo coming out the other side of quite a tricky time at McLaren, where Oscar Piastri is perhaps showing how to rival Lando Norris in his sort of debut season in Formula One. So, you know, clearly Dani's got something to prove. And yeah, Nick, you know, won the world. Has he won the World Endurance Championship? I'm not sure, but he definitely competed in it. And he definitely won the Formula E World Championship a couple of years ago. So, as you say, talented driver. He did that great drive in that Williams, took Latifi's car and scored some points like in his first race. So clearly he's got some talent, and it's a real shame for him. I hope he's got the right support network around him. You mentioned there, like, because I'm really intrigued. You're clearly in and around motorsport. Have you seen that sort of pressure that drivers are under? And have you seen sort of perhaps when it goes wrong for a driver, what that effect can have on them?
Yeah, I think a lot of being a race engineer is that relationship with the driver, and not always about the technical car setup and car balance, but actually managing their expectations and their mindset into those weekends. And how you respond as an engineer can be quite influential to that. But certainly, if they're struggling and you're flapping, it's going to make things a lot worse. So you have to sort of remain the positive, calm one and look to direct them and get them out of that funk. But it can be really hard, when I've worked with a lot of different drivers over the years, and if you see them really struggling and feeling that pressure, how they then almost overdrive, and it makes things worse, and they almost lose their talent that way, if that makes any sense. So you really have to work with them and help them along those, especially sort of in the lower formula where they don't have the same big support network, to get out of that funk and drive as best they can and keep their head purely on what's going on in the car at that time rather than everything else that's going on around them.
I mean, yeah, we're sympathising with a driver that's clearly reached the sort of higher echelon of motorsport and will clearly have a manager, an agent, clearly a supportive team around him. But yeah, like looking at Nick's results, his best result was 12th at Monza, and I don't know how many cars finished, but he kind of had 2 consecutive 17th places at Austria and Great Britain. It might mean he was either the last classified finisher or the sort of penultimate. So yeah, he's not, he's not pulling up trees. And I suppose, for him, it will be about finding another opportunity. You mentioned drivers losing their talent. And before we sort of move on from this topic and explore others, like, what do you think that is? Is it about self-belief? Is it about pressure? Is it about, I don't know, like driving is a little bit instinctual as well as thought out? Like, what do you think it is that kind of makes drivers crumble under that sort of pressure?
Yeah, I think if you're thinking about you driving too much, then we've got a phrase in dressage, like, if you're thinking about the last movement, you've ruined the next one coming up. And I think it's very similar with driving. Those guys, I'm not a professional driver and wouldn't even claim to be able to say I could do it well, but it is so much instinct, and I think they need to be completely present when they're doing that job. And if they get in the car and are thinking about where's the money coming from, what's happening next, what if I screw up this drive, it's like any sport. If your head's just not in that exact place at that exact time, you're going to mess it up, because especially at those speeds, you've got to have such fast reactions that if you're thinking about something else, you're just not going to be at the top of the game like you can be. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does make sense, and I think that comes across in a lot of sports, and sometimes, like, you see sports people, like the person I'm thinking of is like Dele Alli in football. I don't know how much you've heard about him, but he's a guy that basically started his career, had like better stats than any English midfielder for his age that you'd ever heard of, like better than David Beckham at that age, Lampard, Gerrard, and then his career has just sort of fallen away. So that mental side of sort of top level sport is absolutely key. And I suppose, like, the question for you then is, looking at the other side of the equation, Danny Rick, he's back in F1. He's got a chance to impress for the sort of second 2/3 or half of the season. What do you think he can do? And do you think, look, based on the evidence of the last season, and he's had a bit of time off, do you think we could see a resurgence of Danny Rick back to his race-winning ways?
I hope so. He's got to take the ball by the horns. No, Red Bull pun intended there, really. And go for this. There's not many opportunities, and definitely second chances, especially when it comes to Formula One. So he's got to go all out, really. And give it all he's got. Again, like not overdrive and overanalyze, but he seems such a cool, calm character. And I think if he gets his head into that right headspace, he'll be flying away.
I think headspace is key. And I think, like, if we're talking about drivers that need to be in the right mental headspace, maybe Dani Rick is that guy, because he did well when he joined Red Bull and he was up against Vettel. The regs had changed, and he actually scored Red Bull's only win or only wins in 2014. So he was there to collect the points when the Mercedes sort of failed for whatever reason. And then it was just sort of Max getting the ascendancy on him at Red Bull that made him quit the team suddenly. And it's never really, like, he did all right at Renault, but certainly against Lando at Mercedes, at McLaren, it didn't really work for him. He won the race at Monza, but it was a 1-2, and you got the impression that, you know, if the cars had been in the other order, that would have finished that way as well. So it remains to be seen. I mean, you must have a fantastic view into motorsport. I think you've worked, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've worked on GT cars, F1 cars, and hypercars. Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, I'm not going to ask you your age, but you sound quite young. Like, what a career you've already had. Like, tell me. Yeah, I know. I'm old. I'm allowed to kind of patronize people around their age. But look, tell me about. Well, we'll compare that off air. We'll leave that to the imagination of the listeners. But tell me about the life of an engineer.
He just calls himself old, but he's actually not old at all.
Oh well, I'm young at heart. Tell me, what does your role entail? What are the sort of things that you do as an engineer?
Oh, it's quite a broad phrase. I've done many a thing over the years under the engineering banner. Actually, now I'm a contractor, so I only do this part time. It's not my full time life anymore. But certainly, so my first job I was very fortunate to be on the graduate program at McLaren, the Formula One team. So that initially was, of course, the graduate program, which meant rotating through. I got to go through CFD, so computational fluid dynamics department, vehicle dynamics, some race strategy, which is where I fell in love with that. Systems, the shop floor. So that was a really good experience because I got to, move around the whole office. And actually, the bonus of that was I met so many people in so many different departments that it almost felt like if I was stuck, there wasn't someone I didn't know who would know the answer. So that was a really incredible feeling. I then went straight from the grad scheme actually to being a customer support engineer. So we worked with Marussia and Force India. And I was at the time looking after first off Marussia, so helping support that contract, and then swapping onto the Force India one where I was strategist for Paul di Resta actually for the 2012 season back in the day. And McLaren also, we had McLaren GT was sort of a side company, I suppose. Mark Williams, who was head of vehicle engineering at the time, was very keen to get all the young graduates actual trackside experience. So a lot of us sort of, as we call it, weekend warriored, supporting the GT cars where we could. And I ended up moving over. The customer support contracts came to an end, and I was offered either a wind tunnel role or going to work for McLaren GT. And for me, I wanted to be in the thick of it, trackside. I think I really agree with the phrase that everything is won at the factory, or the races are won at the factory, but they're definitely lost at the track. And I liked that feeling of, being in the buzz and making those decisions that could effectively lose you all your team's hard work. So I went into that role, which was again customer support engineer. So I would be trackside supporting numerous teams. That was back in the day, the McLaren 12C. Gosh, I feel old now. GT3. So it basically be fault diagnostics and helping fix the cars. So I'd be looking at a lot of the systems, engine, gearbox performance, working with the words are failing me miserably here, the regulatory bodies to manage the balance of performance, and working closely with the teams to make sure the cars ran really well. And there came an opportunity within McLaren GT for the P1 GTR development program, and I was very lucky to be put onto the test car there. So sort of ran the test and development program for that car, which was It was crazy. It was 9 months we developed that car in. It was, pretty pretty hard work. My favourite stat from that was one of the first tests we did. We did 17 laps in 5 days. I think it was per lap nearly one of McLaren's most expensive tests until the Honda engine came out, where they managed to do even less laps. They're probably not proud of me saying those numbers on air. So yeah, they're kind of the road car, race car, GT, F1 bits I did. I actually left McLaren and went into America's Cup and ran the simulator. So we had an America's Cup boat simulator. And then from there, actually took a complete U-turn and did some project management in defence, and then went to Mercedes HPP and project managed the engine and turbo for the AMG1. And that was my last full-time job. So yeah.
You've said so many like key words that is going to get Den's chomping at the bit to come in. So I could just feel his spirit rising before I let him sort of dig into balance of performance and the kind of AMG1 and et cetera. You mentioned that you were race engineering for Paul di Resta in 2012, and I strategist. Sorry, pardon me. I vaguely recall he had some good results in that year. I think, did he get 4th at Singapore or something like that?
Yeah, that was my favourite race. We were really close to getting 3rd. But that race was awesome, actually, because normally pre-event you prep all your tyre strategy and you've got all your kind of options that are going to happen. And generally, with the tyre modelling guys are so good that it's generally exactly what they say it's going to be. And you kind of alleviate, differentiate a touch from what your original plan is. But within the first few laps, we could see that the tyre deg and performance wasn't what we thought it was going to be. And we completely changed strategy. And that was really fun. We got the hop early. And I think if it hadn't been for the last safety car, I probably would have got 3rd place. So, yeah, that was an awesome race.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I think that, I don't remember Paul di Resta. Did he get on a podium in his career? I can't really remember that. So,
maybe. Don't think so.
No, so you got his best
result,
I
might have done the next year.
Yeah, I feel like he may have done, but now I'm trying to see that mental image and I can't see it. So, let's just say you got Paul di Resta's best result. It's fine.
I'll take that.
Yeah, exactly. That's on the CV, right? Top line. Well, look, let me hand over to Denz, because I'm sure he's got 1,000,001 questions, but that's fascinating. Denz, over to you.
Thank you there, Black. I was just trying to unmute myself. But yeah, no, there's lots of insight that, Kate gave us in relation to all the roles that she's done. And, it's interesting just to see how pervasive an engineering role can be, from being trackside and actually working with the drivers one-to-one, and hearing also what you said about having the connection with the drivers and, giving them the confidence to know that although they're behind the wheel and they can't see all the data, you're kind of reassuring them that you're proactively on top of the strategy and kind of giving them hints and helps where they can to improve the best race for them. And you also mentioned working at the factory and being an integral part in the development of different parts and components, and also even just in terms of hypercars and that kind of crossover we get with hypercars that then also have a road legacy. Katie, please tell us more just about the Mercedes Project One, because that for me, as again being an AMG fanboy, it was one of my favorite cars. When I even heard that had been signed off by Daimler, it was super cool to know that we'd have basically a hypercar with an engine that's derived from a real life Formula One car. In that 2015-2016 season between Lewis and Nico Rosberg as well. So, what were some of the challenges technically behind that in terms of making an engine that's homologated, for racing in the FIA series, all the way down to, an engine that retains the spirit of a Formula One car, but has the usability of a product that, the kind of rich people like F1 Black can go and buy, and custom model.
Yeah, it was a crazy project. I joined it a couple of years in, I think. Just a side note, what is really cool talking about F1 engines in road cars, I think it was Lanzanti or someone put actual F1 engines that had raced around circuits into Porsches. They were cool. But yeah, certainly, they're obviously one-offs and not production, but trying to productionize a Formula One engine is really hard. For one, cost. You need to bring that cost down. You can't the sort of F1 parts, a lot of them are made in-house. They're made low volume. And yeah, okay, the AMG one, there's only 375 cars being made. So in the grand scheme of road cars, that's still a very small number. But compared to a Formula One engine that is it 5 or 6 they make a year? That's quite a significant increase. You've then got on top of that, not only being able to make a lot of the product, but making it last more than 5,000 kilometers. You can't really have your road car engine come out every 5,000 k's. You can get very far. And one of the most interesting things is actually how you'd start it. Because obviously the Formula One engines are not really cold started or never cold started. So yeah, there was a lot of work to be done to overcome that. But certainly, from my side, we're trying to get parts made externally. You want to save IP, so there's nothing that's leaked or taken outside and put into production into big known companies that is actually part of the current Formula One engine IP or intellectual property, I should say. Yeah, gosh, there's so many challenges. But yeah, certainly cold start and lifing, production cost, all of that were massive hurdles to try and overcome. It blew my brains. It really did.
I can imagine, just the thought of it alone is very overwhelming. And, we've seen other similar projects kind of recently with, like, let's say Aston Martin and the Aston Martin Valkyrie, which again was a really huge hit, and Adrian Newey got to design that on the aero side. On top of that as well, we've had even like the likes of the McLaren P1, for example. It's probably like one of the OG kind of hypercars of this generation, but even back then, for it to have a curve system and an active braking system with the lift spoiler and stuff like that as well, it's incredible just to see how much of that stuff from Formula One has actually gone into some road cars. It's not quite the same as my, C43 parked outside on the road, but it's still,
Nice.
it's still interesting.
I'd still take a, got the words of power miserably, a normally powered engine car over a hybrid, I'm afraid.
Oh, thank you. 1-0 to the petrol heads. Absolutely,
Yeah.
Kate. And in terms of also like fan questions, you've had a really awesome one that's come through. It's part of almost like a stable question that gets asked on the podcast quite a lot. It's an edition of Taxi Dinner Avoid. So I'm not quite sure if you remember, Kate, the good old BBC Three channel Snug Marion Avoid, where essentially I think the host would go to random members of the public. There'd be 3 dudes, and then basically the individual would have to pick one to do either or the 3 things. This is like the F1 engineer edition. So, between
Taxi, dinner,
and avoid.
And avoid? Isn't taxi and avoid like the same thing?
Well, let's just play it out this way. So imagine you've been invited to the engineering gala, because the amazing people like yourself have done really so much. You see, it's amazing. And, we try and avoid people like Martin Brundle there with his microphone. But either way, you have to take a taxi into town. Once you do get into town, you're going to have dinner with one of the engineers. And whilst you're having dinner with one of them, there's a pesky engineer there that you have to somewhat avoid or try and, stay out of eye contact with. And out of the 3 engineers, Katie, you have Pete Bonington, which is Lewis Hamilton's race engineer. Bono, my tires are gone. You have Max Verstappen's race engineer, Gian Piero Lambiase, the
GP.
Good old GP. And then in the red corner, you also have Xavi Marcos Pedros, which is, of course, Charles Leclerc's race engineer as well. So, Katie, go on then. If you had to pick one to go in each category, who would you go for and why?
I'm going to have dinner with GP. I worked with him. So he was a race engineer for Paul when I worked with Force India as a strategist. So probably cheating there, but it'd be really great to catch up with him. I've not seen him in many a year. I think the taxi ride would be a Bono. I think that would be really interesting. Like,
with the tires still on the taxi as well, Katie, just to confirm, because Lewis hasn't driven the car.
Okay, cool. Well, I wouldn't put Ferrari in the taxi because you never know where, if it will stop on the right.
Might end up going to a different destination.
Yeah, so that's why I put the Ferrari engineer in the avoid. Awkward, but yeah, that would be my my choices.
What fair choices, Katie. And to be fair, when you see two Ferraris getting outdusted by Albon and a Williams, I think that's warranted. So I can't lie. I think I would have gone for the same choices as you. But also, you touched on a really interesting point there as well. Katie, you got to work with GP, which is obviously now Max's engineer.
Yeah.
Can you describe like how interesting it is, for an engineer of his kind of caliber to work, for a team like Force India, which, again, I rooted for them quite a lot. I was really interested to see them in the midfield and seeing Paul and seeing, the likes of Nico back in those days trying to take it to the big teams. But then for GP to work with a personality like Max, where he can be very kind of cold at times or very abrupt, or they'll say to him, Max, you need to bring the car home. And Max will be like, nah, I want to go and get the fastest lap. To kind of adjust to those two different teams and roles, could kind of give us some insight into that. And also, how big of a deal is it in terms of finding the balance of being authoritative with a driver, but at the same time, not like cramping their style as such?
Yeah, I mean, to touch on the first point, you have very different expectations, and the racing is totally different from the front of the grid to the back of the grid and to the middle of the grid. You get so many different things to think about during a race. At the back, we'd always call it blue flag racing. So you'd be trying to, finish as far up as you can, but not get too many blue flags and not lose time behind the blue flags. When you're midfield, you're trying not to kind of get stuck behind the back markers with the wrong call in the strategy. But obviously, if you get a freak call or one of those races where things change and you can optimize it, you end up being, sort of zero to hero. When you're in the top teams, you basically just got everything to lose, haven't you? Especially with like running Max, I can imagine the pressure is quite high. I think I saw a meme the other day where somebody asked what Formula One was, and they said, "Oh, it's where people try and finish as high as they can behind Max Verstappen." So yeah, I think he, it's great to see him doing so well. He's such a nice guy, and I think the feeling he must be getting and different sort of problems and sort of engineering problems, etc. with Red Bull compared to Force India must be interesting. I think the bonus of something like Formula One is that changes every year when you get a new car, so there's always something new. But I think I saw him. Is there one video where he like throws his headset down or something on the pit wall? That really made me chuckle. Or smack Max's hat or something like that. I probably shouldn't have said that in the podcast, but I saw it on TikTok or something, so it's obviously not hidden away. But yeah, it is hard to build that relationship with your driver. I think once you got to know someone for that long and you build respect with each other, it's easier to do. In W Series, every round we drew our drivers out of the hat, so we had someone different to work with every single race weekend, and trying to build that relationship and build trust and respect for each other in 3 30-minute sessions is very difficult. I can't remember where I was going with this. So yeah, it is a hard line to balance, but I think it's like most relationships and friendships that once you've got that respect and trust, you can honestly say anything, and you both know what you mean and how you mean it. And if something gets heated, it's not a permanent problem, or you've not got anything against that person. It's just business.
Absolutely. And I definitely agree with you in relation to those kind of points you raised as well, Katie, because especially for the level that Red Bull are operating at now, whether fans like it or they don't like it, that makes no difference to them. They're out there to win, and they really need to win in fashion, in style. It's almost as if they want to win in such a dominant fashion that it's going to crush the spirit of the opposition as such. So, I could understand how sometimes it gets a bit intense, or it can get a bit heated between obviously GP and obviously Max as well. And Max is looking at it from his perspective of trying to, not only just win, but show why he's so good. But then also GP's thinking it from the wider scope of things of preserving the car, preserving the engine, like trying to maximize results and not take any uncatered for risk. And it's interesting to see how that dynamic plays out, and how it changes if, like, let's say, for example, this year they're ahead. They've done really well to get the car in a window where it's way more dominant than the others. But then the other years as well, when they didn't have the best car and it was more just, Max kind of like driving on the limit and kind of relying on GP to give him the tidbits of information here or there to go for the moves or to pull off certain strategies which we never thought would have been possible. So it's really interesting to see how that plays out. And, I don't imagine GP is going to be gone anywhere soon. And also Max has a really long-term career with Red Bull in terms of the contract he signed as well. So that's a partnership which I guess we're going to see grow, just even like with Lewis and Bonner as well. So that's exciting. And then, on the topic of exciting things as well, Kitty, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about this as well. It was the home of motor racing. It was the British Grand Prix at the weekend.
It was.
Indeed, and to be fair, there was a lot of orange. And at first I thought, didn't know there were so many Dutch fans invading the country to support Max. But it turns out that a little kid called Lando practically stole the show with some really genuine pace that he had in that McLaren. And just what was your take on the race? Like you mentioned as well, safety car kind of came out in a way which seemed to benefit more so Lewis and Lando, which hadn't pit yet. But again, Lando's impeccable driving to keep Lewis behind defensively. And just the kind of pace that McLaren have had, I know you hold McLaren quite closely to yourself as well. What do you make of it all?
Yeah, it's nice to see McLaren back up there again. It's nothing. I don't think there's anything harder than when you work for a team and they're dominating and taking numerous championships to falling quite hard and not getting the results that you're all expected to, and you almost have to work twice as hard when the car's not fast for less reward. So to come out the other side and see all that pay off, I think it's really just really pleased them. I think they're any team that does the same thing it's the same, but obviously got a little soft spot for McLaren. Just really pleased for all the boys and girls that are working their butts off there to make that happen. And I think I just got massive FOMO all weekend because my Instagram and social medias were completely filled with absolutely everyone at Silverstone. Certainly felt a bit sad that wasn't there. We were lucky to be there W Series last year, so the FOMO was definitely real.
I could definitely relate to the fear of missing out on that one, Katie. And just like it's always such a good race. I mean, there's always just the English weather that plays into it in terms of the potential for rain. Of course, as well, we had some other kind of cars that look slightly out of position. We had Pierre Gasly challenging at the top end, or the bottom end of the points. We had Albon really holding on for dear life as well. There were so many different kind of sub races happening whilst obviously the three were at front. But another thing to kind of take into consideration as well, Katie, and just to get your perspective on it, is I think today Pirelli have set Mercedes and Red Bull the arduous test of going out there and testing a new Pirelli compound designed to be used without tire blankets. What's your take on this in terms of Pirelli messing around potentially with the compound, which could affect the way teams go about strategy? There's been a lot of safety concerns as to whether or not Formula One cars could handle that sort of style of racing of such, because in IndyCar and other open wheel series, or even in like the LMP class, we have no tire blankets, but a lot of other people have kind of given a perspective that it would be quite dangerous, and Monday Formula One cars wouldn't be suited to having no tire blankets. So what's your take on this? Do you think it could be an interesting move to spice up the race, or do you think it's something which maybe needs a bit more trial and error and testing to see whether or not it's viable for Formula One and the FIA more so to monitor in relation to the races?
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting one, isn't it? So they banned them in WEC this year, didn't they? And then there was so many crashes on the outlaps that they brought them back for Le Mans itself. I mean, if any teams can do it, it's Formula One. There's a lot of money there to develop it. It's again though, on the flip side of that, testing is massively limited. So that makes it more tricky. I can see why Pirelli are trying to do it. Motorsport is quite hefty on the old climate change and impacting the environment, and tyre heaters and tyre ovens aren't really great for that. And it is one thing that could potentially reduce cost, but potentially also reduce the carbon footprint of our sport. But yeah, it's not going to be easy at all. But definitely, they've got the right brains and the right people to be able to find a solution to that, I think, within the Formula One team. So be really interesting to see. I'm not pro it or against it either. But I do think it's something that we should be exploring to make those changes if we can.
Oh, absolutely. Like you mentioned as well, it has its benefits, not only just in terms of the on-track action, but also in terms of the sustainability costs, which is also a huge thing in this modern-day era of Formula One, and just generally like motorsport. I mean, not to go too off topic, because I'm going to hand it back to Blag in a second, but I was just like looking at a lot of Audi fanboys, which they're in kind of a mixed camp, because Audi have officially kind of pulled out of the LMDH series as such. And now also it looks like the customer, cars are not going to be running the Audi R8 in the GT3 series, all in an effort to kind of push all the resources towards their re-entrance, or their first entrance, I think, into Formula One. So it's really huge in terms of attracting manufacturers and kind of giving everybody a new target to work towards, because even such things as tires make a huge difference in the way how the races play out. And if a team, like you mentioned, can crack the code and find a way to switch the tires on immediately without cooking them, and then getting that advantage in the undercut with tires that don't have a warmer, then that could add a whole different complexion to the race, and it could almost be as huge as from when we went to groove tires to slicks, and vice versa as well. So really interesting to see how that would pan out. And I hope that it's something that takes a lot more consideration, and it's not a knee-jerk thing that the FIA kind of make a decision on. But yeah, it would be really interesting to see. And on the topic of importance in motorsport as well, we've got a really pertinent topic. So Blag, I'll segue you back in.
Hello, yeah, fantastic. So really intriguing to hear that you were an engineer in the W Series. And like, we've spoken to Sabra Cook, and I've heard sort of other podcasts talking to people like Bianca Bustamante and other drivers. It's really intriguing to hear that concept about not charging the drivers and genuinely trying to give them a platform to succeed. It's unfortunate that it folded last year, or formally this year, but didn't complete last season. Can you tell us a bit more about like that experience, like when you joined, what your sense was about whether it's met its, or whether it was achieving its purpose? Like, really intrigued to hear how, even what the kind of feeling was like among that community and among that paddock.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely one, everyone was pretty sad. I can't say a lot of us were shocked, but it was certainly, it had become quite a nice little family. Last season was my first season, and I was, keen to be involved with it, really. It's saying the right things, isn't it? I think they did. I mean, they obviously did a lot of things right, and I think they have helped push sort of female drivers into the light a bit more. For me, I think what would have been really great is that the winner each year got a drive in a championship, the next one up from W Series, whether that be sort of like FRECA or F4 or F3. They had a paid seat in a championship so they could go and develop, or that they're perhaps paid to have instead, a couple of seats in some championship teams to bring girls up and through that way. Because fundamentally, there's never going to be a grid full of women, and I honestly believe to get better, you need to be competing against people who are better than you. And I just don't think there was enough competition perhaps coming through. It would have been great for, if we'd perhaps seen Jamie graduate sooner into another championship, and how she had got on. I think for me, that was just what was missing from the championship. But I certainly think they did a lot of good, and I'm quite excited to see what this F1 Academy does. They've got a lot more test days. They're set up with full teams now, so yeah, I think it's opened up a lot of opportunities and helped people see what wasn't seen, as it were.
Yeah, that's a huge point about like progression. If the aim was to kind of get people to the top level of motorsport. I mean, this might be a controversial question, and I'm talking with complete conjecture and hearsay, but like rumor had it that Jamie Chadwick, did get a decent amount of prize money. It might have been at the end of the second year. And essentially like the rumor, although, clearly I could be ill-informed, was that she just didn't, what that would have bought her wasn't a competitive drive in F3 or F2. So like, is there any truth to that, or like, is it hard to know? And like, what more could W Series have done? Did they need to give them more money, or was it more linking in with like your Premers or the Campos Racings to give them an actual seat?
Yeah, I mean, I think the overall prize pot was 1.5 million, wasn't it? And I think if that had been used instead of, each driver did get cash. Well, obviously not a suitcase full of it, but money into their accounts. It would be more fun to watch them wheeling some big suitcases, wouldn't it? But I think if, perhaps that had been an injection perhaps even if it was a full 1.5 million or a chunk of it was into a seat, I do think that would have been enough. Perhaps the way it was broken down, so the amount each driver got wasn't enough. But I certainly think it would have been a good leg up. And if you really, for me, okay, motorsport's hard and it's easy for me to say from the outside. But if you really want something and you've got a big injection like that coming in, you'd be looking and finding sponsors to see you through. And the publicity that could have come off the back of W Series from winning that championship and then carrying that into another series, I think could have been quite powerful. I can't comment on Jamie's situation. I don't know it. But certainly I think if it had been me in that seat and me driving, that's what I would have been gunning for.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, she's gone to Indy NXT, formerly known as Indy Lights. And I think one of the big challenges of joining I guess it used to be called the Race to Indy ladder, is that you're competing with a lot of drivers that have done the kind of other feeder series in the US who all know those circuits. So I think Jamie's still kind of finding her footing. And I wonder, like, before we talk about the F1 Academy, because I think it's really interesting to hear your take on that. It does feel quite unfair that like people like Jamie Chadwick probably get disproportionate pressure, as they're almost like representing a whole 51% of the global population in motorsport. It's like, any other driver that had won, had her background in the single-seater sort of junior formula, they wouldn't have this pressure on their shoulders. So what, like, do you perceive that there's sort of additional pressure? And like, if so, is there anything we can do about it? Or is it sort of a necessary stage in this kind of transition towards a bit more equality?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. It does put you in that spotlight. I know when I was coming through my engineering journey, you weren't compared against anyone else other than the other girl in the office. So it's certainly a bit of a role for me. I kind of thought everything had changed and everything was just moving on. Having seen, I still can't believe some of the comments that crop up on the W Series social media pages or some of the girls drivers pages. I've seen things on drivers' pages saying, women aren't any good at sport. I don't know why they're trying to fund women doing any sport. Like, how can you blanket women's sport at all just off a race series? But I can't believe people still have this mindset. And that's the baffling thing for me. And I think the bigger thing and the bigger picture on this is that there's still people that think that. And that's what we've got to change, really. Women's racing is behind, but I don't think that's a case of pushing more women. And I say this with the engineering stuff as well. And I think a lot of people have always asked me in the past. For me, it's giving kids that earn enough knowledge of these sports and industries. When I was at school, I didn't have parents into F1, so it wasn't, or engineers, so that wasn't even a career path that crossed my mind. we've got social media now, we've got internet now, we've got so many things that means we can open these doors and show people what there is. And I think by the way in which the world is now changing, and we're very lucky as women now that we are pretty much, it's getting there with equal rights and whatnot. Certainly go back 50 years, it was a totally different story. And I think in 50 years time, it'll be different again. And I think there'll be equally more men doing perhaps the more female sports. So yeah, I think it's just a transition we've got to go through. And I don't think in forcing it on people now is necessarily the right thing, but educating people is. Hope that makes sense.
And like when we talk to like Taylor Ferns is a racing driver in the USAC Silver Crown in the US. It's sort of an oval racing series. Some of it's on dirt, some of it's on pavement. I love that they say pavement. But yeah, anyway, like I don't know, but she and Sabra Cook have both talked about like the pyramid, in the sense that like you need a hell of a lot of people, be they men or women, at the bottom of the pyramid getting into motorsport at the beginning, because clearly not everyone is going to be suited to it. But if you just, the sheer weight of numbers, if you get that interest and engagement of young kids from loads of backgrounds, you will end up getting a higher number of those graduating up into the sort of more elite levels. So yeah, hopefully that's the case. And like, let's segue onto sort of the F1 Academy, I think it's called. It was a bit like, for me, I don't know what you think, it's slightly unfortunate timing that like the W Series, I think they had just announced that they were not able to complete their season last year. And it wasn't that long after, if I'm not mistaken, that like Formula One announced, okay, we've got this F1 Academy. I think they're using Formula 4 cars. Clearly there are some positives there, that they're like recognized Formula 2, Formula 3 sort of teams. And some of the field is the same, but like, it is a shame that sort of, it almost feels like, no, we're not going to step in and sort W Series out. We're going to do our own thing. And by the way, we're not going to broadcast it on TV live. I don't want to sound a downer, because it's a fantastic opportunity for the drivers involved. So I guess, like, what's your view on that Formula One Academy and perhaps contrasting it with W Series? Do you think that it's perhaps more sustainable going forward?
Yeah, I think, I don't know whether it was a rumor or true or not, that it was brought forward early. I don't know if that's true, but my understanding is that it was brought forward a season early, because of W Series going under. So, don't know how true that is, but there we go. Something I heard. Like, it's really odd talking to people and not seeing them. I don't know what it's saying.
It's all right. Like, I wish we had a video. Yeah.
But yeah, there's so many things we don't get to see or know when it comes to the commercial decisions that these businesses make. Even when you're working in F1 in a team, and you wonder why on earth your own team's made that decision, because it's made at such a high level commercial, from a high level commercial place, that we, when you're stuck in the nitty gritty, you just can't see it. There must have been a reason why. I don't know what that was. I do like the way that the F1 Academy is run. I think it's really positive. I don't know, for the W Series, it was all effectively one team. And obviously it was run on a budget because of the way it was funded. I think by the girls having to bring money into it, they're probably taking it a bit more seriously. It is partly funded, but I think the fact, I think at the age I was saying, I've got my own business as well. When you give things away for free, people don't always take it that seriously. Whereas if you start to invest a lot of your own money, you suddenly feel like you need to make the most of this situation. And I think that's a really good thing about the Academy. They've got so much more seat time, so that's great. For W Series, they'd have an hour and a half every weekend, and there wasn't really any testing in between. And it'd be on circuits that none of them are ever driven before. So I don't think they really got to develop or show their talent as much as they could. Whereas I think the Academy, because of all the testing and the fact, they're working in teams, the setup's far more open. I think they've got, my understanding is that you can change the whole setup, whereas on W Series we were quite limited to what we could change. I think it's really positive. I like the premise that W Series obviously did that to make it more even. But I think it's going to show. Well, from what I've seen so far, it's shown there's been different people winning and a bit more exciting racing going on, and I think that's really positive. I hope that all made sense.
Like, we've seen multiple race winners, and Jamie obviously did a fantastic job in W Series. I always root for like the underdog, so I liked Alice Powell, and I kind of like it when things don't follow the script, a bit like when the public kind of wanted to name that Boaty McBoatface. I kind of think, but
I'm exactly
you know what I mean?
the same.
Yeah. I'm not calling Alice Powell Boaty McBoatface. Do not track me down, Alice. I apologize. But like it was almost like Jamie Chadwick was like anointed and was going to be the champion, and had a bit of press behind her. And so Alice kind of, as a she hadn't retired from racing, but it was definitely like later in her career, and she's obviously exploring media now. But I would have loved it if she'd won. But it's great to see, like, in the academy, you've had a variety of winners. I mean, I guess the flat out question to you, and I don't know how closely you're following the field, but like the acid testers, do you think any of the lineup in the F1 Academy this season has what it takes to perhaps graduate and go up to sort of Formula 3?
I hope so. I was lucky to work with Ali Pulling and Marta Garcia last year, and both those girls really impressed me. Their attitude, their work ethic, their ethos about how they go about the racing, they're always wanting to learn and soak up more and improve. Attitudes like that, I think, will go a long way. So I really hope so. It'd be really great to see that.
Absolutely. And, I guess it goes back to that point around like the undue pressure that will be on any of them that makes it. But fingers crossed. And of course, we can't forget Sophia Flörsch, who's already in Formula 3, returning. Yeah. And doing all right, actually. And we'll see how she does through the rest of the season. So I'll move this on to the next subject, and then I'll bring Denz in, because, of course, and I don't want to sort of overburden the conversation about sort of gender equality in sports. I think it's important. But, like, I guess the question for you moving into engineering side is perhaps there's something here around education. You talked about, a younger age, children, hearing more about motorsports and the opportunities. Maybe it's just a pipeline issue that not as many women are going into sort of maths and physics at school and then into engineering at university. Do you think there's some sort of truth to that? And is there more that can be done? Yeah,
I think that's massively changing, even after over the last 15 years. I think it's really, really changing. I think the times have gone really where you'd give a girl a Barbie and a boy a Hot Wheels have gone. It's very much changing, but I think the best thing is we can now see what the STEM subjects can bring us in future. There's so many times we're sat at school and go, no, trigonometry, what's the point of that? When are we ever going to use that in our life? Well, if you go, well, actually, this is where we'd use it to design a car, or, this is how it's used in Formula 1, or this is how it's used on an aeroplane, it changes your whole perspective. I imagine it's probably the same for the art subjects as well. But it's just so good now because we can see where those subjects can take us, which I think we couldn't really before. And careers advice relied purely on your family and friends around you to steer you into where you're going to go. Now we can see it on the TV, we can Google it, their socials. It's probably overwhelming now. I can't imagine a lot of kids going, I just want to be an influencer. But for me, that's the best thing, is the fact that we're being able to educate people at a much earlier age on where anything can take you, and that there's endless possibilities out there, and it isn't just about being a doctor or a lawyer or all the things you see straight in front of you day to day. There's a whole world of opportunities out there.
It's an absolutely huge shout, and I guess reflecting on my own experiences, like when the careers advisor at my school was a teacher, it's like, and clearly there's not a knock to teachers. My wife's a teacher. If you've been to school, gone to university, and then got into teacher training and gone back to school as a teacher, how much of the world and different careers do you know? So yeah, hopefully, sort of the more that kids can hear about from all backgrounds can hear about all the opportunities that STEM can bring them, that would be huge.
I agree, and I
Go on.
was remembering one of my lecturers at university, my master's. I think like he helped design rockets for the KGB or something.
Are they being monitored by the authorities? Like, that feels a little bit.
It did make you wonder at the time, but yeah, he definitely had some interesting stories about the Russians to tell us. But yeah, no, it's there is a lot more we can learn from the world now.
So I'm going to hand over to Dens, who's going to ask the next question, which hopefully should flow. So Dens, are you there? Over to you.
Oh, indeed I am. And, you know, rockets, KGB. Yeah, it's an interesting time. It doesn't sound too dissimilar to what's happening around the world right now. But anyway, this is not a political show. We just keep it strict for the most part. Katie, you know, you were talking on the topic of like women in motorsports. Obviously, the progression and the movement, which is still something which needs to change and evolve over time, and you know, something we're all looking and aiming and striving to work towards, of course. But one encounter that I thought was really interesting that you had was with one Hannah Smith. You know, practically people say the godmother of all of Red Bull's success when it comes to those really tricky strategy calls. You know, like how important is it, you know, for you, like to have someone like Hannah propelling Red Bull to some of the success that they've achieved and all the decision making and strategy work she's done as an engineer for them? And you know, in the encounter that you had with her as well, like could you tell our listeners more about that? And you know, was there anything she said to you in that encounter that stuck with you to this day?
It's a bit embarrassing actually, because the photographer had been taking, I think we just borrowed their pit wall, and I was like, oh, who's that lady over there and what does she do? And he explained, and he was like, oh, Hannah, this is Katie, she really wants to work in F1. And she was like, brilliant, do you? And I was like, no, I kind of did your job 13 years ago. So it was a bit embarrassing, really. But no, I think for me, the education piece for kids for young age means we get the right people in. I don't think we should be getting women in just because there should be more women. Like, does there need to be? I don't know. I think we just need to get the right people in, and that's more important. People like, for me, like Hannah and Bernie, just go about doing a great job, and they become role models because they do their jobs so well, and they're proud of doing their jobs, and then they're not standing there going, look at me, I'm in F1 and I'm a woman, you should all appreciate what I do. They're just getting on with it, and what they do and how they do it is enough. I feel like we get a lot of people just kind of, I don't know how to politically word this, but just sort of doing it to be a woman in that industry, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like a token gesture. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just trying to be like, oh, look at me, I'm doing this to be different. And actually, you know, it's finding, I've said all along, passionate people that are good at what they do and love what they do, whatever gender or not gender or black or white, or none of that should matter. It's just purely about being passionate about what you're doing. And perhaps, it's great to see all these different people in. And I think the strapline they always use is, you can't be what you can't see. And I do agree with that. But for me, you know, the Hannah and the Bernies are doing it the right way. They're just being really bloody good at what they do. And that's perfect for me, I think.
Absolutely, you know, and I think I'd have to second you on that, and all of us would have to second you on that as well, Kate, in terms of, you know, you want people to be in the roles based on merit. You want them to be in roles because, like you said, they're passionate about, you know, the field that they're in, and they want to bring change. They want to contribute to that industry or sector. And, you know, in terms of just both of those engineers you mentioned, I mean, we've given Hannah her flowers, but then in terms of Bernie as well, I think she's been a really great addition to the Sky Sports F1 coverage team in terms of giving us insight, and you know, even just kind of telling us about some of the stuff she's done with Aston Martin, and you know, working with like drivers of different skill sets as well, and giving us the kind of insight, you know, straight from, you know, the source in terms of how the dynamics of a team work can play out as well. So I'm really hoping that, you know, we'll see more opportunities like this come about, more kind of like, exposure into these kind of sectors as well, and kind of hearing it from different perspectives. I mean, to go completely off the topic, I think for the
Can I just say
Hungarian
back to that?
Sure, absolutely.
Can you name a male strategist?
A male other than James
Vowels until
Vowles?
yeah, boom.
Oh, that's gonna be my answer. I'm gonna lock in. And
Me,
Lawrence
no, I had
McKees.
that answer. Unbelievable. That was my answer, Dens. You can't steal that.
Nah, I said it first, bro.
But this is the thing, I think, like, we should just be pointing out people who are doing a bloody good job. And if there's other strategy calls, I'm sure other teams have made bloody good strategy calls, but they haven't been called out because they're not a woman.
Well, yep, that's actually true as well. And again, something which it's really interesting to see that perspective, and also just as, I guess, in a way, the media plays a role in how we dissect the content, and almost like seeing like the people behind the machine as well. It's interesting just to know that. And yeah, like you mentioned as well, I mean, I hadn't really, obviously knowing James Vowles is a Mercedes strategist at one point, and obviously the Williams team principal is one thing. But yeah, like you mentioned, it should just be because they're doing an amazing job rather than them just being a female as well. So I agree with you on that point. I think it's like almost a thing that we have to unlearn as like consumers, and as people that support the sport, but also in a way, just kind of adapting and kind of realizing that, that these people that do their jobs, they're really brilliant at it. They've come through so many different journeys, sometimes not as conventional, but even still, like, just every contribution that they make is another kind of like layer that adds to a team's either success and progression in a sport, and it doesn't just come down to one person. So that's a really good point there as well, Kate, and I completely agree with you. And yeah, I mean, it's been such a really insightful episode, and I think a lot of our listeners will take away a lot from the conversation. Kate, before you wrap it up, I just wanted to ask as well, like, you're not working kind of full time with the team as such, and I know that this kind of season you've been doing more GT3 work, but is there any kind of projects coming up soon that you can share in relation to the work that you do? And just generally as well, what advice would you give to the young apprentices and kids looking to aspire to be just like you one day?
Yeah, I mean, I'm staying probably contracted now. I've actually got my own equestrian sports management business that I do as well. So that, alongside the GT3 racing, both of those keep me pretty busy. And it's actually really different to contracting because you never know what's coming for the next season. So I'll have to wait and see. But certainly we've got a busy season this year, finishing off GT Open and GT World Challenge Endurance, and we're fighting for both championship titles. And we actually won Spa 24 last week, so we've got a lot on. It's quite an exciting season. But in terms of advice I'd give, my biggest thing is just ask people, whether that's for experience, where they can, where you can go, what you can try and do. I'm a firm believer, if you never ask, it's always a no. And the worst thing that can happen is somebody says no, and that's just a not right now. So go and get that experience. If there's F1 in schools, if there's Formula student at university, find a local racing. You can go on weekend warriors. A lot of teams will take you on for free at weekends if you want to gain experience. Just wherever you can, get involved. Just get your hands dirty, get stuck in, and don't be afraid to do stuff you probably wouldn't be expecting to do. I can't tell you how many cable ties I've cut up and put in cars in the last few weeks. So yeah, just be that person that gets stuck in.
No, I think that's really valuable advice, Kate. And again, like, we're so thankful and really happy, that we've had the opportunity to have you on. We definitely need to get you back on for some future episodes, and definitely a YouTube live, because I know you mentioned it was a bit bizarre to kind of have this remote kind of podcast, which is just audio only. But I think lots of gems and nuggets of great advice there, and experiences too, that our listeners will be able to relate to, old and young, because we don't discriminate here. But yeah, it's so key, just to have resilience, to keep your head up, like you mentioned as well. when one door closes, another one opens, and like it's always just a thing where I find sometimes it hurts when things don't go the way that you expect, or you really put your best foot forward in something and it might not turn out the best way you wanted. But like we kind of started off in the beginning, you were looking to do law and then ended up going down a completely different route, and now you've got this beautiful journey and adventure that you've been on, and it's a really inspiring story that I feel a lot of people resonate with and take inspiration from as well, Katie. So we really thank you for your time today, and also we look forward to the future adventures. We'll have to learn more about your equestrian business as well. I bet the horses prance a lot better than the one on the red car, but let me not say that before the Tifosi come out for me. It's been amazing. And before we go, Blag, any final notes?
Two really quick things. One, in equestrian, when you're getting the horse to go back into the trailer, do you say box? Just I have to ask that.
No, but I might have taught my dog that to go into her basket.
I knew it. I knew that these things cross over into real life. And then secondly, like a bit philosophical to end the show, but like, Katie, what is your sort of aspiration? Where do you want to go? Where would be the dream for you to achieve in your sort of career?
That is a very good question. A lot has changed for me over the years, and I think that's why I sort of stepped back and do a little bit part-time now, because I've certainly got big aspirations with my horse riding. But it would be really cool next year, Le Mans bringing in the GT3s for the first time ever, and it would be bloody cool to be a part of that. That's
what we try and do, is we try and get people to say their intentions, and hopefully you're putting it out there into the universe, and we'll be paying attention next year, Le Mans. Hopefully you get that gig. So fingers crossed.
I'll let you know if I do.
And where could we follow that story? Have you got like Twitter, Instagram, like social media that we can all follow?
Yeah, I'm a bit rubbish. I set it all up to help people more with it, but trying to do, as always, too many things at once. But I've got, it's called BTS, of a motorsport engineer. So behind the scenes of a motorsport engineer on Instagram and TikTok. There's a few bits about certainly my career path and whatnot that's probably the most useful on there, but happy to answer any questions and anything else, and I'll try and keep it a bit more updated. I don't think I've put much on there this year, but yes, I'll do my best.
TikTok, I told you were young. TikTok is definitely for the younger generation, right? So, or people that like to be spied on by the Chinese Communist Party. Take your pick. But that's
it's the latter. I tried TikTok. I'm 35. I don't really know what I'm doing with these things, but you've got to give them a go, haven't you?
Yeah, you've got to give it a go. Well, look, BTS motorsport engineer, is that right?
BTS of a motorsport engineer, yeah.
Of a motor. Okay. Well, we'll all. I just about have Instagram, so we'll definitely follow you there. And those of you that have TikTok, go and follow Katie over there. Fantastic. So I think that's a wrap for today. So if you've made it this far into the episode, there's no way that you can't rate us, review us, subscribe, give us a like, whatever it is. And most importantly, we don't have a marketing budget. Like Georgie HQ does not supply Denz and I with a marketing budget. So the best way of marketing this podcast is for you to share it. And you can do that on all of the platforms. Look us up on @StripTheDip on Twitter. It's probably the one that we talk about the most, but we're also on Instagram as well. And of course, we're on YouTube. So please do follow us there. And that's where we have our F1 lives, or our lives, as it were. So thank you very much, everyone. What a fantastic episode, Katie. We'll have to have you on again. This has been F1 Blag, joined by the amazing AMG Denz. Tune in next time. Good night.